Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to finish Act 1 and meet Juliet. We're also going to meet something else in this section that is crucial to this trope of the boy meets the girl. It's called the blocking force. You can think of movies you've seen that are romances. It's not the boy sees the girl sees the boy, and then they get married. There's always something between them that makes it difficult. The boy is ugly or doesn't have any money or something, keeps him from getting the girl. Whatever that thing is that keeps the two from being together, it's called a blocking force. In Romeo and Juliet, we already know one of the blocking forces. The chorus told us about it. It's that ancient grudge between the two families, the Capulets and the Montagues. So this problem's been going on a long time, and it's a blocking force between these two families, and then between Romeo and Juliet, because one of them is a Capulet and one of them is a Montague. We meet another blocking force, though, when we first meet Juliet in Scene 3. In Scene 3, we have on stage Juliet's mother, Juliet, and Juliet's nurse. And the nurse is definitely a comic figure. We'll look at that later. But what we find out is that Juliet is about to have a birthday. She's about 2 weeks away from her 14th birthday. Now that sounds very young to us today to be thinking about marriage. But that's what Juliet's mother believes. In fact, Juliet's mother tells Juliet, when I was your age, I'd already had you. It's quite young, but when she's 14, she's supposed to get married to someone. And the blocking force is that Juliet's mother has someone in mind for her, and it's not Romeo. It's Count Paris. And Juliet's mother asks Juliet, what do you think of him? The nurse says, oh, he's a man of wax. That's very interesting because I don't know if being a man of wax is a good thing. It means that you can change yourself so easily. Then Juliet's mother says, no, he's a flower. These are not very positive things for a man either. And they ask Juliet, what do you think of him? And Juliet says, I'll take a look at him. And the mother does a very interesting sort of metaphorical idea about it. And this happens in Scene 3, around line 79. This is what Lady Capulet, Juliet's mother, says. What say you? Can you love the gentleman? This night you shall behold him at our feast. The Capulets are going to have a party. Read over the volume of young Paris's face and find delight writ there with beauty's pen. This is a metaphor. She's going to say that this is that. That's what a metaphor is, saying one thing is something else. And here the one thing is Paris, and he is a book. And if you read his face, read this book, you'll know if you like him or not. This is actually a special kind of metaphor called an extended metaphor, because we have a metaphor and then she extends it. She keeps talking about it, and that continues in the next lines. On line 85, she continues this metaphor of Paris being a book. And what obscured in this fair volume lies, find written in the margent of his eyes. This precious book of love, this unbound love, to beautify him only lacks a cover. So he's the contents of this book, and what does he need? He needs Juliet as a cover. The mother is saying something kind of interesting here about the relationship between men and women. Men have the content, they have the substance, like in a book. And the woman, the wife, would just be the beautiful cover designed on top of him to sell the book, perhaps. So her as just an accessory for the substance of Paris. Well, we know why they want to get married, or at least the nurse says it with her comic way, is that need to get married so that Juliet can have a baby. As nurse says in line 95, women grow by men. She means women grow pregnant, not grow in intellectual depth or in ability, but just grow to have children. So we see this very conservative idea about what marriage is. And what does Juliet say to this? She says, I'll look to like if looking, liking, move. So I'll take a look at him and I'll see how I feel about it. Okay, so we have the blocking force here is Paris, who the mother wants to marry Juliet. But another blocking force are sort of these conservative, traditional ideas about what the relationship between a man and a woman should be. This would be another kind of love, I think, from Lady Capulet's viewpoint. It's the idea of traditional love. Love in marriage. Okay, so we have our blocking force. Let's move along from there. The party itself is described as a masquerade. So everyone that attends the party is going to be wearing some sort of mask. This is, for us, great because Shakespeare, as I said earlier in one of the lessons, he doesn't give a lot of stage directions. We don't really know what the actors are doing. And here at this masquerade, we don't know what the actors are wearing. What kind of mask do they have on? What sort of costume do they have? It's a costume party. Since Shakespeare doesn't tell us in stage directions, that's great because we can imagine that they're wearing whatever we want. For the stage direction itself, we can see this on line, in scene 4, line 29. This is where we have Mercutio, another friend of Romeo's, and we'll look at Mercutio more closely later. But this happens on line 29 when Mercutio is putting on his mask. He says, "Give me a case to put my visage in." Visage is your face. And it says in the stage direction, he puts on a mask, but we don't know what kind of mask it is. And Romeo, too, is wearing some sort of costume, but we don't know what it is, and Juliet as well. We can watch different ways that this has been shown on the stage or on the screen. So, even though we don't know how Romeo is dressed up, we have some possibilities. And I want to go ahead and sort of jump forward here to that moment when Romeo first meets Juliet, because in this scene, we're going to really have some revelations about Romeo's character. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. When Romeo first meets her, this is in scene 5, lines 43. This is when Romeo first sees Juliet from a distance. So at line 43 in scene 5, he says, "Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night as a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear." Earlier I said, look for how Juliet is described as both a moon figure and also as a sun figure. We see it here, this torches to burn bright. This is that sort of sunlight fire imagery. But then she hangs upon the cheek of night. That's the moon. So we have her being described in both ways. So when Romeo sees her, this is what he thinks of her immediately, is that she's beautiful. And he even says this in line 46, "Beauty too rich for use." Here is not really about love so much, I think, but really about the concept of what beauty is, that beauty is something that has no practical value for Romeo. But look what Lady Capulet, Juliet's mother, said about Juliet. She would be the cover for the book that is Paris. That cover, it might be a beautiful cover, but it's a useful cover. It has a practical value. While here, for Romeo, it's a different idea of what Juliet's beauty could be. Not something that has its practical use, something to be used, but something that has no use, something that is just beautiful. It's an interesting concept from Romeo and shows something about his character. He's a romantic. He's not a practical guy, I think. After that, he calls her a snowy dove among the crows. A snowy dove, it's a white bird versus these black crows. So we have this idea that he sees Juliet as this sort of very pure figure. After that, we see that he has a plan as well in these lines when he says, "The measure done, I'll watch her place of stand, and touching hers make blessed my rude hand." When he says the measure done, what he means is there's a dance going on. They're doing a waltz or something like that. And when the dance is over, he'll see where she stands. And then he's going to go over to her and try to touch her hand. This is a very bold character, I think, here, that he's already ready to make his move on this girl. And don't forget, he just previously said to Benvolio that he loves Rosalind and could love no one else. Now, what does that say about his character? Well, he's very capricious. He's moody. He changes his mind often. Or we could say he's young. So let's move forward to when he actually does approach Juliet. After the dance is over, we assume there's no stage directions. This happens in the same scene on line 93, 92. This is what he says. "If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this: my lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. We don't really know what's going on unless we imagine it in our minds. We have to visualize what happens here. Tybalt and Capulet just had a conversation. Tybalt said, "Romeo's here, a Montague, we've got to get him out of here." And Capulet tells Tybalt, "No, calm down, it's a party, let's just be calm." And Tybalt leaves the stage. And then immediately these lines come from Romeo. "If I profaned thy unworthiest hand." We have to imagine that Romeo has walked right up to Juliet, he's standing beside her, touches her hand, or maybe even holds her hand, and says this to her. That's very bold, very bold. He's confident. And then what does Juliet say back to him? Immediately after, she says, "Good pilgrim." Some people think that when she says "good pilgrim" here, it means that Romeo's costume is he's dressed up as a pilgrim. A pilgrim is someone who's seeking a connection with God, and they're traveling to some place, like to Mecca, to commune with God. So if she calls Romeo a pilgrim, we think of him as this spiritual figure. So we have this plane where this is the physical world we're living in. Then this would be the spiritual world. And calling Romeo a spiritual figure, a good pilgrim, is interesting because we have another dichotomy. Like last time, I mentioned that dichotomies come throughout this text. And here is one where we had the idea of spirituality and physicality. And look, with that idea in your mind, look at these scenes of what Romeo says to Juliet. He's very suave, he's very smooth, he's a very cool guy. Here's what he says. "Have not saints lips and holy palmers too?" And Juliet says, "Aye, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer." And Romeo says, "Oh, then dear saint, let lips do what hands do." What's going on here is they're being very playful with each other. And it's complicated for us, but let's imagine she says, "Oh, you're dressed up like a pilgrim. Oh, good pilgrim you are, this saintly figure." And he says, "Oh, well, let us do what saints do, which is to kiss." Because when people pray, they put their hands together like this. So he's saying, your lips are hands and my lips are hands, so let us pray together, or let us kiss. It's very bold to go up and hold a girl's hand and then say, "Hey, do you want to give me a kiss?" And even more interestingly is that they do kiss. Remember, this is the very first time that they've met, and they're going to go ahead and kiss. That happens in the stage direction on line 105. He says, "Then move not, while my prayers effect I take." And it says, he kisses her. "Thus from my lips by thine, my sin is purged." What you see happening here is that dichotomy of spiritual versus physical is being conflated. They're made into one thing. For Romeo, and maybe for Juliet, the physical is the spiritual. There's this sensual spirituality, and that's the idea about love. It's not a physical thing, it's not a spiritual thing, it's both of those things together. Another idea about love here, and that would be a type of love we might call agape love, which is a great love for God that we only wish we could feel for people. But Romeo seems to feel it here at first sight. Then from this kiss, first of all, you have to remember, these are teenage kids. Juliet's not even 14 yet, and they have this kiss. And then she says to him, this is line 109, she says, "You kiss by the book." Now, how do we interpret this line to say, "You kiss by the book"? We could think, first of all, that maybe Romeo is like a student of love. He's studied love, or he has great experience, and he kisses very well. But then we wonder, if Juliet knows he kisses very well, what experience does she have with kissing? Well, it's very questionable here. Romeo definitely seems to know what he's doing. Or you could read it that he kisses by the book, that he kisses like a child, like a student who is not yet experienced in love. You could read it both ways, depending on what you think. An interesting point here is if we're looking at Romeo, we know he's bold, he's confident, he's brash, he's capricious. And Juliet, we have a sense maybe she's pure, maybe she's not. We only just met her. But some of the other characters at this party are pretty interesting too. First, I wanted to look at Capulet, and this is Juliet's father. He lets Romeo stay at the party. Even though they have this ancient grudge, he lets him stay. There's something there where he's concerned about appearances. What will people think if there's a big fight at the Capulet party? Also, throughout this party, Capulet's running around saying, more light, and he wants more candles lit, more torches. He wants to light things up. Why does he want to do that? I think that we see in this text, there's a dichotomy, again, between people who are older and people who are younger. And the older people in this text, they have no idea what's going on with the younger people. It's kind of like today. I think a lot of our parents, when we're kids and when we're teenagers, they don't really know what we're doing at all. And Capulet certainly doesn't. Right here at his party, Romeo is there, who shouldn't be there. Romeo has kissed his daughter and held her hand while he's there. And him calling for more light seems to him to be calling for the idea of to know more of what's going on, have more knowledge, more light. We can see this even further because right after Romeo kisses Juliet, the nurse is there on the stage. So at line 109, Juliet says to Romeo, "You kiss by the book." And the next line is the nurse. "Madam, your mother craves a word with you." She sees the nurse sees the kiss. She goes, "Madam, your mother has a word with you," and sends her off. So the nurse was standing there while Romeo was doing this? That's odd too. Then Romeo finds out from the nurse that Juliet is a Capulet, and then Juliet finds out from the nurse that Romeo is a Montague, and we have that blocking force made aware for the characters. And this is one of those points of discovery, that agnanoresis that I taught you in the first lesson. A point of discovery that this person is from the wrong family, a blocking force. And let's take a look just at the very end of this act with what Juliet says. This is toward the end, around line 133. She says to the nurse, "Go ask his name, if he be married. My grave is like to be my wedding bed." Nurse, can you find out who that is? And if he's taken, oh, so horrible for me. But what she says there, "My grave is like to be my wedding bed," that's a technique called foreshadowing. Because we already know, the chorus told us, Romeo and Juliet are going to die. Her grave will be her wedding bed. This foreshadowing here builds tension and dramatic irony, because Juliet doesn't know that's going to happen to her. And when she finds out he's a Montague, she has these very famous lines on line 137. "My only love sprung from my only hate. Too early seen unknown and known too late." She uses the same techniques that Romeo used earlier of antitheses, matching the way that they speak, showing that they have this connection, and also showing the complexities of love, that it can come out of hate. So for next time, we're going to recap a little bit and see if this play is following the tragic model of Aristotle, and we're going to start Act 2. So you should go ahead and take a look at Act 2 and read through that, and we'll start talking about it for the next lesson.